The Galactic Council's orbiting station shone like a giant jewel against the blackness of space. Built from shimmering metal and glowing energy panels, it hovered above the blue and green planet Zareth Prime. Inside, hundreds of delegates from dozens of alien civilizations had gathered. They came in all shapes and sizes, beings with translucent skin, multiple arms, or glowing eyes. Each species was proud, powerful, and used to being listened to without question. For the first time in history, humans were invited to the council. The news had caused quiet ripples throughout the galaxy. Many aliens were curious, some were skeptical, and a few even laughed quietly at the thought that humans, small, fragile, and young in space travel, could hold a place among the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Ambassador Alara Kane stood at the human delegation's table, her hands resting lightly on the surface. She was Earth's chosen representative, a woman known for her intelligence, patience, and careful observation. Beside her were her fellow delegates, each one a specialist in diplomacy, science, or strategy. They had spent years preparing for this moment, knowing that the fate of humanity's future in the galaxy could hinge on their decisions. The other delegates whispered among themselves. "Primitive humans," one said in a soft voice. "Can they even understand our laws?" Another asked. Some eyes showed curiosity, others amusement, but all underestimated the humans before them. The council chamber was vast. Holographic projections hovered in the air, showing maps of trade routes, disputed planets, and fleets scattered across several star systems. The council leaders moved with grace, their voices calm but firm as they opened the session. "Today," said the chair of the council, a tall being with silver scales, "we gather to discuss the final stages of a treaty that will bring peace after decades of conflict. Let all present speak freely, for this is history in the making." The humans listened quietly. They did not speak immediately, but their eyes followed every motion, every gesture, and every word. Ambassador Kane noted the parts of the treaty that could harm Earth or limit its freedom. She could see the hidden advantages written for other civilizations, and the subtle pressure applied to force smaller powers into compliance. During a private meeting before the public session, the human delegates whispered among themselves. "We cannot accept clauses that threaten our independence," Kane said. "We will not sign anything that risks Earth's safety, even if it angers the Council." Her team nodded in agreement. They were ready to act with caution, but also with courage. The first day of the Council talks was filled with formalities. Aliens presented reports, statistics, and projections. They spoke of shared resources, mutual defense, and the benefits of the treaty. Humans remained calm, asking questions only when necessary, carefully testing the Council's knowledge and willingness to respond honestly. By the second day, the tension had begun to grow. Humans asked pointed questions. How would trade disputes be resolved? What protections existed for smaller planets? What measures would prevent hidden aggression? Alien representatives struggled to answer. Some tried to avoid the questions with complex language and vague promises. Others smiled, assuming humans would accept whatever explanations were given. But humans were not so easily convinced. Kane presented a small simulation showing possible treaty failures, supply chains collapsing, fleets misaligned, and neutral planets caught in conflict. The simulation was simple, yet it made the aliens stop and think. Some were shocked, others were visibly annoyed. How could such simple beings foresee problems that the galaxy's most experienced leaders had missed? At the end of the day, the Council proposed a preliminary vote on several key points. The humans stepped away from the voting table, a clear signal that they were not yet satisfied. Murmurs spread through the chamber. "They are bluffing," one alien said. "They will return tomorrow," another predicted. Yet deep down, some members felt unease. Humans had already demonstrated insight, patience, and courage. Ignoring them might be a mistake. Outside the chamber, the humans reviewed their notes. "This is just the beginning," Kane said. "If we step in too early, we might be trapped in decisions that are unfair. We must wait, watch, and act only when we are certain it is right." Her team agreed. They were not aggressive, but they were firm. They were ready to walk away if the council ignored justice and fairness. That night, as the orbiting station drifted silently above Zareth Prime, the humans gazed at the stars. They had come a long way from Earth, traveling across the void to a place where they were underestimated and tested. Yet they felt no fear. They knew their strengths: creativity, morality, and the ability to think in ways others could not. The Council, confident in its control, believed humans would bend to pressure. They did not yet realize that humans had patience as strong as steel, and courage that burned brighter than any star. The stage was set. The future of the galaxy was about to be reshaped, not by the most powerful, but by those who were wise, determined, and willing to step away until fairness was achieved. Humans had arrived not to follow but to lead, and the galaxy, though it did not yet know it, would soon feel the weight of their presence. The second day of the Galactic Council began with a sense of unease. Delegates from alien civilizations filled the chamber once again, their expressions a mix of curiosity, impatience, and subtle suspicion. The humans had not voted on the preliminary points the previous day. Their absence at the table was like a quiet ripple that spread uneasily through the council. Ambassador Ilara Kane observed the reactions carefully. She noticed how the older species exchanged worried glances. Even the council chair, the tall silver-scaled being, seemed slightly off balance. Kane did not intend to intimidate, but she knew that humans had a different approach: careful observation before action, clarity over confusion, and patience paired with resolve. The first session of the day focused on trade agreements. Alien delegates outlined rules for sharing resources, moving fleets, and establishing trade routes. Many clauses favored larger and older civilizations, leaving smaller worlds like Earth vulnerable to economic pressure. Kane raised her hand. The chamber quieted immediately. A human voice was still rare here, and all eyes turned. "We must clarify the protections for smaller planets," she said calmly. "Earth, and other worlds like us, cannot accept terms that limit our independence or endanger our populations. How will the Council ensure fairness if disputes arise?" A blue-skinned diplomat with 4 arms smiled slightly, as if amused. "These humans are bold," the diplomat muttered to a colleague. "They ask questions we assume are irrelevant." Others tried to answer, but their responses were slow and uncertain. Humans were exposing gaps that even the Council had overlooked. Kane did not stop at questions. She displayed a holographic simulation of potential conflicts. The aliens watched as trade routes failed, fleets were misdirected, and resource shortages caused tensions between planets. It was not aggressive, it was logical and clear. The Council could not deny the possibility of these failures. A murmur of concern spread through the chamber. By midday, tension in the room had grown. Some alien delegates whispered among themselves. "Do they actually understand the complexity of interstellar politics?" one asked. Another shook their head. "More than we give them credit for," came the quiet reply. Humans, however, remained calm. Kane leaned slightly forward, addressing the council chair. "We are not here to disrupt peace," she said. "We are here to ensure it lasts. If we sign a treaty that is unbalanced, conflicts will continue. That is not beneficial for anyone." The council chair's voice resonated through the chamber. "Ambassador Kane, your concerns are noted. However, time is pressing. Decisions must be made. The vote will continue soon." Kane nodded politely but did not move to the voting table. Humans had made a deliberate choice. They would not participate until their concerns were addressed. This refusal surprised many. Alien delegates were used to compliance, not patience paired with principle. In the hall outside the chamber, the human team gathered around a holographic map. They analyzed supply lines, fleet positions, and diplomatic connections. "They assume we will back down," Kane said softly. "But the truth is they underestimate humans. That is our advantage." Her deputy, a calm and thoughtful strategist named Raj Patel, nodded. "We have patience, and we can see patterns others miss. We wait, and we act only when the timing is right." Back in the council chamber, debates grew louder. Aliens tried to argue that humans' refusal to vote could slow the treaty and endanger fragile alliances. Yet no one could dismiss the clear logic presented by the humans. Slowly, some delegates began to reconsider their positions, realizing that ignoring Earth's perspective could create bigger problems. Late in the day, Kane received a private message from a sympathetic alien diplomat. "Your caution is wise," it read. "Many of us worry the Council moves too fast. If you continue to observe, you will have opportunities to guide the process." Kane smiled slightly. Even among those who respected the Council's authority, some recognized human insight. As evening fell over Zareth Prime, the Council chamber glowed softly. Humans returned to their quarters, reviewing notes and preparing for the next day. They were calm but alert. They knew the Council would try to pressure them. They knew some aliens might test their patience. But humans had a strategy: stand firm, speak clearly, and step away when principles demanded it. In the quiet moments before sleep, Kane looked out at the stars through the transparent walls of the station. The galaxy stretched endlessly, filled with potential allies and hidden dangers. Humans were small compared to some civilizations, yet they had strengths that others lacked: ingenuity, moral clarity, and an ability to act when others hesitated. The Council might believe it controlled the process, but humans had already begun to influence the outcome. They were reshaping discussions simply by observing, questioning, and refusing to act blindly. Tension had risen, and the aliens were beginning to realize that humans were not predictable. Somewhere in the galaxy, unseen by most, fleets and trade routes waited, delicate and vulnerable. The Council's mistakes were not obvious yet, but humans were watching carefully. They were ready to act, not recklessly, but with precision and wisdom. And when the time came, the Council would learn a truth it had not expected. Humans were patient, smart, and unafraid to stand alone for what was right. The day ended with no resolution, but the seeds of change had been planted. The Council thought it was in control, but the humans' quiet presence had already begun to shift the balance. And as Ambassador Kane settled in for the night, she knew the real work was only beginning. Humans were not just participants. They were observers, thinkers, and soon, they would become indispensable. By the third day, the tension in the Galactic Council chamber had grown into something heavier. Delegates whispered behind screens, their voices filled with uncertainty. Humans still had not participated in the votes. Their absence was no longer just a minor disruption. It had become a quiet warning that something was being overlooked. Ambassador Alara Kane watched carefully as the Council continued its proceedings. Without Earth's consent, the other delegates assumed that humans were too small a force to matter. They thought the vote could go forward without consequence. They were wrong. Outside the chamber, fleets moved along mapped trade routes, systems prepared for new regulations. But problems began to appear almost immediately. Supply shipments missed their destinations. Fleets arrived at the wrong planets. Minor skirmishes broke out between two species that had not had a dispute in years. The Council was puzzled. How could such problems appear suddenly? From the observation deck, Kane and her team monitored the situation. Humans had advanced sensors and communication networks that allowed them to track these disruptions in real time. They saw that the Council's assumptions were failing. Decisions made in the absence of careful review were creating instability. Raj Patel, Kane's deputy, pointed to a cluster of data. "They've miscalculated the logistics for this sector," he said. "If we don't intervene, a neutral planet could be caught in a conflict." Kane nodded. "We won't intervene directly yet. Let them feel the consequences of their mistake. But we will offer solutions if it gets worse. This will show the Council that our restraint is deliberate, not weakness." The Council began to notice small cracks in their plan. Some delegates approached Kane privately, asking for clarification or advice. Many were careful not to seem dependent. But the questions spoke louder than words. Humans had insight, humans had foresight, and humans were beginning to shape outcomes without even participating in votes. During a midday session, a young alien delegate from the planet Orcs approached the human table. "Ambassador Kane," the Orvexian said nervously, "we have disagreements with our neighboring systems. Your advice could prevent unnecessary conflict. Will you help?" Kane looked at him calmly. We will assist only if the Council agrees to fair negotiations for all parties. Earth will not accept biased solutions, but we can guide discussions and propose options that prevent harm. The Orvexian nodded and returned to the council chamber. News of the interaction spread quickly. Other species began to whisper. The humans were not just clever, they were fair, principled, and capable of solving problems others could not. Back in the observation room, Kane and her team analyzed multiple data streams. They found errors in fleet coordination, gaps in communication between planets, and inconsistencies in resource distribution. Every failure was small but pointed toward one conclusion. The Council had overestimated its control. Kane tapped the holographic display. They assumed the galaxy could be managed by authority alone, she said. They didn't account for human creativity, careful observation, or strategic thinking, and now they are paying the price. By evening, the Council called an emergency meeting. Rumors of the humans' influence had reached every delegate. Some were eager to seek their guidance. Others were embarrassed that they had underestimated a relatively young civilization. The Council chair cleared his throat. It is clear that some unforeseen problems have arisen. Ambassador Kane, your observations have been noted. We request your participation to help stabilize these issues. Kane rose slowly. She did not smile, nor did she show haste. Her calm presence filled the chamber. We are willing to assist, she said, but only under terms that respect fairness, equality, and transparency. We will not simply correct mistakes that could have been avoided if proper care had been taken. The chamber went silent. The delegates realized, perhaps for the first time, that humans were not just observers. They were indispensable. The Council's assumption that humans would passively follow orders had been a grave mistake. Kane and her team began to outline solutions. They identified key supply routes that required rerouting, fleet deployments that needed coordination, and potential conflicts that could escalate if left unchecked. Every suggestion was logical, precise, and practical. Aliens who had doubted humans now watched with quiet respect, some even with admiration. By the end of the day, the Council had no choice but to accept human guidance. Even those who had been skeptical privately admitted that humans possessed a unique combination of intelligence, patience, and moral clarity. The lesson was clear. Underestimate humans at your own risk. As the humans returned to their quarters, Kane reflected on the day. The Council had made a mistake, but the situation was now an opportunity. By guiding the Council with fairness and careful strategy, humans could show that leadership was not just about power. It was about wisdom, clarity, and the courage to act when others hesitate. Above Zareth Prime, the orbiting station glimmered in the starlight. Humans had stepped away from the peace talks initially, but their absence had revealed flaws in the Council's plans. They had proved their strength without aggression, and had begun to reshape interstellar diplomacy quietly but decisively. The galaxy would soon learn an important truth. Humans might step away from unfair situations, but when they engaged, their influence was undeniable. The Council had underestimated them once, and it would be their first of many lessons. The fourth day of the Council sessions brought a new energy to the chamber. Humans, once observers and challengers, were now at the center of attention. Aliens who had previously whispered doubts now approached the human delegation, some cautiously, some openly, seeking guidance. Ambassador Alara Kane stood calmly at the center of the human table. Her eyes scanned the chamber, taking in the faces of the delegates, some anxious, some defensive, and others curious. The Council assumed that absence would weaken us, she said softly to her team. Instead, it has shown the gaps in their planning. Now we have an opportunity to lead. The first meeting of the day focused on a dispute over the trade of energy crystals, a valuable resource critical to multiple systems. The Council had already attempted a solution, but it was flawed. Transport routes were unsafe, and some planets faced shortages while others had surpluses. A green-scaled diplomat from Orvex spoke first. Ambassador Kane, your insight could prevent conflict here. Can you provide guidance? Kane nodded. We have analyzed the supply chains and fleet movements. We suggest rerouting shipments through neutral systems to avoid contested zones. Additionally, communication hubs should be synchronized to prevent miscommunication that could spark further conflict. Her words were simple, yet precise. The Council listened, realizing that the humans' approach was both practical and fair. While alien delegates often focused on power or prestige, humans emphasized clarity, efficiency, and balance. Raj Patel, Kane's deputy, projected a visual simulation showing the new routes. Every movement, every schedule, and every potential obstacle was highlighted. Delegates could see the logic and the benefits. The simulation made a quiet impact. Murmurs of approval swept through the chamber. With the humans leading, the council began to operate more smoothly. Disputes over territory, trade, and fleet coordination were resolved faster. Kane and her team proposed fair compromises, guided by principles of equity and transparency. Aliens who had doubted humans now began to trust them, not blindly but with respect. By midday, several factions sought private consultations. Humans listened patiently, asked critical questions, and provided solutions that took multiple perspectives into account. They never forced decisions, but the mere clarity and fairness made their advice almost impossible to ignore. The council's leadership, once confident in its control, now felt both relief and unease. Relief because the humans' guidance solved problems efficiently, unease because it became clear that the council had underestimated a relatively young civilization. The humans' ability to think strategically, act decisively, and maintain fairness had reshaped the council's approach entirely. During a break, Ambassador Kane addressed her team. "Remember," she said, "we are here to help but not to dominate. Our goal is not control but fairness and lasting peace. The council must learn that leadership comes from wisdom, not arrogance." Some alien delegates observed this interaction quietly. They were beginning to understand that humans combined intelligence with integrity. Unlike some of the older species, humans valued fairness over tradition and solutions over status. It was a different approach, and it worked. By evening, Kane and her team had helped mediate multiple disputes. A potentially dangerous conflict between two neighboring systems had been resolved peacefully. Supply chains were stable, and previously ignored planets had received the resources they needed. The council members were forced to admit, without humans, many of these solutions might have taken months or years, or failed entirely. A delegation of younger species approached Kane privately. "Your methods are remarkable," said a small winged alien. "We have learned more about fair negotiation today than in decades of council meetings." Kane smiled politely. "The goal is not to impress," she replied. "It is to ensure every voice is heard and every system is treated fairly. When that happens, peace becomes possible." By the end of the day, the council's mood had changed. Skepticism had turned into cautious admiration. Leaders who had once dismissed humans as minor players were now quietly consulting with them. Even the council chair, silver-scaled and usually calm, acknowledged the truth. Humans had stepped into a leadership role not by force but through intelligence, fairness, and patience. Back in their quarters, Kane reviewed the day's progress. The humans' careful planning and measured guidance had prevented potential crises. Yet she knew the work was not done. "The council has begun to see us differently," she told her team. "Now we must continue to show that human leadership combines wisdom with restraint. We lead best when fairness is our guide." As the station orbited above Zareth Prime, the stars reflected on the human team's calm faces. The galaxy, for the first time, had begun to recognize the unique strengths of humanity. The ability to solve problems logically, act decisively without aggression, and insist on fairness even when it was difficult. The humans had proven a vital lesson. Leadership is not about force, influence, or fear. It is about wisdom, clarity, and the courage to stand firm for what is right. The council's earlier mistake of underestimating humanity had been corrected. Now humans were not just participants in galactic diplomacy, they were guides, mediators, and the quiet but steady hands shaping the future of the galaxy. And above Zareth Prime, as the station glimmered in the starlight, it became clear that the galaxy's course had shifted. The humans' presence, once underestimated, had transformed the council's approach entirely. The lesson was simple but powerful. Underestimate humans at your own risk. The fifth day of the Galactic Council meetings felt different. Where once the chamber had been tense with skepticism, now it buzzed with quiet anticipation. Humans were no longer just participants, they were central to the process. Delegates who had doubted them were now consulting them at every step, seeking guidance and insight. Ambassador Alara Kane entered the chamber with calm authority. She observed the assembly, noting subtle changes in posture, tone, and expression. Alien leaders who had once whispered about primitive humans now approached her openly. The transformation was clear. Humans had earned their place through intelligence, fairness, and unwavering patience. The council began discussions on the final version of the peace treaty. Humans listened carefully as each delegate presented their proposals. Kane's team analyzed each clause, ensuring that every planet, large or small, would have protections, fair trade, and equitable defense responsibilities. Unlike some delegates, humans focused on clarity and practicality, asking questions that exposed hidden loopholes or unfair advantages. One particularly tense issue involved shared defense protocols. Several species wanted authority over disputed sectors, but smaller planets feared being trapped in conflicts not their own. Kane spoke clearly. Defense agreements must respect sovereignty. No planet should be forced into a conflict it did not choose. A fair treaty protects all, not just the powerful. The chamber grew silent. Some delegates exchanged worried glances, realizing the implications. Humans were reshaping not only the treaty, but the way decisions were made. It was not dominance, it was leadership guided by fairness and logic. By midday, humans had proposed solutions to nearly every dispute. Fleet coordination, resource distribution, and diplomatic representation were all carefully balanced. Aliens who had doubted them now nodded in agreement. Even the council chair, silver-scaled and usually reserved, spoke with admiration. Ambassador Kane, your guidance has been invaluable. Your insights have prevented errors that could have escalated into serious conflict. Kane responded with quiet humility. The goal is not to impress, but to ensure peace is lasting. When fairness is at the center of decisions, trust grows naturally and conflicts are prevented before they begin. The vote for the final treaty began. Humans were present, not as mere participants, but as guarantors of balance. Delegates from every species understood that without human involvement, the treaty could have favored the powerful unfairly. When the votes were counted, the treaty passed unanimously. Every system would have fair protections, resources would be shared equitably, and defense obligations were clear and voluntary. The chamber erupted in a subdued cheer. Alien delegates approached the humans expressing gratitude and respect. "We underestimated you," one said, a multi-limbed diplomat from Jorath. "Your foresight saved countless lives." Kane nodded. "We only acted with fairness and careful thought. That is what humans value." Outside the chamber, the humans reviewed the day's success. The peace treaty was not just a document, it was a symbol. It demonstrated that intelligence, integrity, and patience could overcome arrogance, assumption, and old rivalries. Humans had stepped away when principles demanded it, and had returned to guide the galaxy toward stability. The Council issued an official statement acknowledging the humans' role. Earth has demonstrated wisdom, courage, and fairness. Their contributions have shaped a treaty that ensures peace and justice for all civilizations. Kane read the announcement quietly, allowing a small smile to form. The recognition was not for personal pride, but for the value of human principles, patience, insight, and morality. That evening, Kane looked out at the stars from the observation deck of the orbital station. Below, Zareth Prime rotated slowly, bathed in sunlight. She reflected on the journey. Humans had arrived as newcomers, underestimated and overlooked. Yet by remaining patient, standing firm on principles, and offering clear guidance, they had changed the Council's approach entirely. Raj Patel joined her. "We have proven something important," he said. "Humans are not just participants. We are capable of leadership that others respect, not fear." Kane nodded. "Yes, and the lesson is clear. We step away when fairness is ignored, but when we engage, we shape the future. That is the strength of humanity." The galaxy, for the first time, saw humans as more than just a rising civilization. They were problem solvers, fair negotiators, and leaders who could guide multiple species toward peace. Aliens who had once dismissed Earth as weak now understood its value. Humans had not used force or intimidation. They had used intelligence, patience, and moral clarity. As the station orbited silently above Zareth Prime, the stars reflected in Kane's eyes. The Council had faced its mistake in underestimating humans, and now the galaxy had gained a powerful lesson. Human presence, once doubted, had become essential. In the quiet that followed, Kane turned to her team. "Our work here is done for now," she said. "But the galaxy has learned something important. When humans are fair, thoughtful, and determined, We elevate everyone around us. That is how we lead. The humans had stepped away from the peace talks once, refusing to compromise on principle. That decision had shown the Council that patience and integrity were strengths. By stepping back, they had revealed the Council's mistakes. By stepping forward, they had guided the galaxy toward lasting peace. And as the stars twinkled above, it was clear that humans had not only secured a fair treaty, they had earned the respect of the entire galaxy.